We find ourselves ethically destitute just when for the first time we are faced with ultimacy, the irreversible closing down of the earth's functioning in its major life systems. Our ethical traditions know how to deal with suicide or homicide, even genocide. But these traditions collapse entirely when confronted with biocide, the extinction of the vulnerable life systems of the earth, geocide, the devastation of the earth itself. The human being is at a cultural impasse. Radical new cultural forms are needed. Our text of Scripture comes from two places in the Gospel according to St. Matthew today. First in the 15th chapter, beginning in the 29th verse, and then the familiar passage of the Beatitudes in the 5th chapter, the very beginning of what we call the Sermon on the Mount. Would you listen as the Spirit of God brings a live word to you? After Jesus had left that place being the encounter with the Canaanite woman where he offered blessing and healing to her outside the place of Israel. After he left that place, Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee and he went up onto a mountain where he sat down. Great crowds came to him, and they brought their lame, maimed, blind, mute, many others. They put them at Jesus' feet, and he cured them, so that the crowd was amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed whole, the lame walking, the blind seeing. And they praised the God of Israel. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up upon the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak, and he taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice, be glad, for your reward is great in the heavens. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who went before you." The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God lives forever. We have been talking about evolution and its interface with Christian faith these last weeks of Lent. When you say the word evolution, I think to most people in our culture, the first thing they think about is we're descended from apes. They're slightly more educated. Maybe what they think is we have a common ancestor with the apes. And maybe some people, especially if they're well-traveled, know something about birds on the Galapagos Islands and evolution. They'll hear of Darwin. And those who really get the theory recognize that it's about the evolution of all life. It's just how it works. Because you see, evolution moves in steps. Life grows in steps. It responds to stress, and it responds to pain. And so things are transcended. The lower forms of life are transcended and become more complex, surprisingly novel, So single-celled organisms somehow come together, and while they remain single cells, they end up in cooperatives. Slime mold, as we've been saying over these last weeks. And as that cooperation continues, what we find is that some of those single cells start to take on a specialized role. Maybe they even get together in groups and perform specialized functions, and so eyesight is born, or movement. I mean, it's really quite remarkable the way responding to stress and pain, to some problem that's confronting creation, something new emerges out of that, what Disney called the circle of life, the movement from death into new life. And we've talked about the fact that that very process, from the death to what's new, not to just a repeat of what's old, is the movement from cross to resurrection. For when Jesus died on the cross, he was risen as new humanity, not in the old. I'll say more about it probably on Easter, but I don't take that to be just a metaphor. I take that to be something very real, that human beings, in fact, step forward and continue to evolve, and that Jesus is a part of that evolution. So why does it matter? It matters because the world is in outrageous pain. We all know it. The world is in outrageous pain. We do what we can to push it away, but it eats at us. We're aware of it. We know it. And it's almost like Spirit is calling us out to heal. That's what Jesus was about. He was about that in our first passage as he healed the lame and the maimed and the blind and the mute, everybody that was brought to him. But Jesus was about more than healing the body, because evolution is about more than growth in the body, than the evolving of life. It's true that evolution does take place in the human being, in our bodies. You know, we are ancestors of, or our ancestors were creatures that had just a reptilian brain. They could just respond to the fear and the raw sense of protecting life and grabbing hold of what will promote life forward. But we also are ancestors of creatures that developed a mammalian brain, something that is able to process emotion, to develop community, holds people and gives people a sense of feeling as they move forward in their life. And then we are the product of people who eventually developed that neocortex, that frontal lobe that seems to make us at least relatively unique. And so we were able to develop a sense of consciousness. It's more than the physical brain that was evolving. It moves us into the evolution of consciousness. Jean Gebser, a German researcher, began to map out the way consciousness evolved from archaic to magic to a kind of mythic to a mental and into an integral frame. Researchers have been tracking the way human beings' consciousness has in fact evolved. Fowler, a researcher at Harvard, he looked at the way our faiths, our beliefs evolved from magic into mythic, into a kind of mental state, into a more coherent integral state. Researchers are mapping the evolution of human beings time and again, and our cultural values move along with that too. Claire Graves, Beck, and Cohen, they look at the way culture evolves. They recognize that we were once in a tribal culture where magic frame of mind took hold, that we became national cultures where a more mythic or traditional frame took hold, until finally modernism got its claws into that mythic set of values and started to deconstruct. We are able to recognize that human beings evolve. Our culture evolves, our internal lives evolve, our brains has evolved. Even the structures that hold us together evolve. Once upon a time, all we did was go out and hunt and gather, poke things around. Until finally we figured out that maybe if we plowed and we stayed put, we would be able to plant crops. And eventually began to become quite inventive, developed industries. Till finally we find ourselves in an information age. My point here is this, that human beings evolve, and when we evolve internally and externally, and we do that both as individuals and as a group of people, and all of that affects one another. One thing affects another, it unfolds. And what we know is that Spirit drives it forward, that Christ was looking and pushing forward to that moment of complexity and unity that would make us whole. Moves forward by steps, all the time responding to pain. The world is in outrageous pain. And what shall be our response? If the Spirit is unfolding within us, what shall be our response to outrageous pain other than outrageous love? Not a wrap it up and hold it close love, but a productive and creative kind of love. Because Spirit is moving in this world right now. A new step is right on its way, because evolution responds to enormous pain, and the conditions are right here. Consider what's happened to the internal understanding of the presence of Spirit in individuals as modernism has taken hold. Modernism has done a good job at developing its technologies, at allowing us to become more and more productive. But it has deconstructed any sense of the active presence of God in our lives. And without the active presence of God in our lives, without any sense of the direction and the purpose for our lives, we find that we've put to use all our technical abilities to satisfy our own lusts and desires, and we have created a world that is on the brink of destruction. That's what happens when that spiritual line of development basically atrophied, stopped evolving, stopped growing, as everything else took off without it. Perhaps even more worrisome, at least to me, is this postmodern deconstruction of the very idea of truth. You know, all truth is perspectival. Can't quite nail down any kind of foundational truth that you could be able to hold someone accountable to. And the reason it's so disturbing is because when you think about it, whose truth is going to win then? If there's no foundation, no way to understand what is true and what is false, the truth that's going to win is the one with the biggest gun. It leads us directly towards conflict and war. That's what happens when the religious line of development, that thing that gave us that sense of purpose and foundation, that gave us a sense of law, began to be deconstructed and fall apart. Without Spirit, without a communal value that we'll call religion, we've run into a violent world where we are eating ourselves alive from the inside out. The world is in outrageous pain. And Spirit calls. Spirit calls you, and Spirit is calling me. The marks are right there. Just as Jesus was calling disciples. I wouldn't claim that Jesus knew anything about evolution, but Jesus knew about participating in Spirit's activity in the world. Jesus knew about participating in the evolution and the health and the growth of the world. Yes, he healed people on the mountainside that day, but he went further and imagined what a world would look like that growed further, evolved further towards the unity and the presence of God. People read these Beatitudes and Scholars argue over whether or not they were intended to be for real or not. Was Jesus just an idealist? Oh, he was setting out an idea that maybe we could work on someday. No, he meant it. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. He was imagining a world that had unified in the presence of God. A world that was driven by the power of the Spirit of God unfolding within us. So imagine living in that place. In a place where you attend to your own life, to the evolution of your own spirit, to the evolution of the culture around you. Can we engage in the marketplace of ideas as though it matters what we think, what is true, and what is false? Can we take care of our bodies in a way that allows us to be effective? Can we work on the structures of this world so that they become more and more just? Spirit is calling. I don't know what the next is, because Spirit is about novelty. But Spirit is blowing. The days of a deconstructed faith are over. It's time for us to reconstruct, take hold, and evolve into the next step. You know, it is no wonder to me when I look at evangelical churches and I see how they are growing and expanding. I have some problems with the way of looking at the theology, perhaps. But you know what? I think that a tremendous number of people, in fact, I know a tremendous number of people in those churches, take a look at the modernist and postmodernist deconstructive of faith. They see a vast spiritual wasteland and say, that's not for me, I'm staying right here. They're not perfect any more than we are. Spirit's alive, Spirit's moving. Spirit's alive and moving when we see people talking about being spiritual but not religious. Why would they care? If not the winds of Spirit's faith were working in and amongst us. Do you feel it coming? Are we reaching that tipping point where something else has to grow in place of the nightmare and outrageous pain that makes up our world? My friend Mark likes to say, then can you play it one step larger? Can you love outrageously one step larger than you love and work today? That's what Jesus is about in the Gospel of Matthew from chapter 1 right to the end, when he seeks to make disciples of all nations. Playing it one step larger so that the world around us can be formed in that powerful, loving Spirit of God. You think you can't do anything? Paul Tillich, a theologian of the last century, was fond of saying that we talk about the Renaissance, you know, that moment in human history when ideas came alive, when things moved forward and we came out of the Dark Ages. About 1,000 people were involved in the Renaissance. 1,000 human minds. Think you can't do anything? With the Spirit of God within and unfolding, we have power to change this world. The outrageous pain requires outrageous love. The only question is, will we play it one step larger?